Hello and welcome to a new Q&A. I have been away for past week shooting a commercial first in Stockholm. I don't really live in Stockholm, so I have to go to the south side, which is about 3 hours, so that I wouldn't count on living in Stockholm, or that place where we were at wasn't exactly in Stockholm. And then I went to Norway to Ålesund, which is a very pretty place. And I spent some time there. So now I'm back. And let's see what we have in terms of questions. So let me know if the stream kind of goes slow or the audio gets weird or anything, so I can reset the whole thing. Because we're trying to solve like the optimal way of streaming. So we try to raise the quality, lower the quality, raise latency, lower latency. Haven't found a perfect sweet spot yet. Also needed to buy a big antenna to get even better reception. That's where we're at with the live streams. Still trying it out. I think that we're almost, there. We almost know what we're doing. Not really, but almost. For me, the stream is stalling. That probably means that I should reset. Is it for everyone or just Dark Horse? I'm just gonna wait to see if I get a little... It's getting a little slow. Okay, let me reset just in case. I'll be right back. Better, worse, same. Let me know. So let's see how we do this. What do we have? For me too, sometimes. Okay, so let me know if it's still the same. I've tried to lower the bit rate, but I'm not sure if it's doing its thing. Hopefully it is working right now. Anyway, just to tell you a little bit about what I was doing last week, since I only uploaded once, I think. Mainly because we were out of town. So we're doing a commercial shoot, which is partly with some trucks in Stockholm, and then we went to Norway to shoot some trucks. And then we came back, and now we're shooting the last piece on Wednesday, I think. And then we do some editing. So basically it's a commercial thing that's maybe a little bit different. It's like a interactive piece. So we'll see what happens. Audio is gone. Everybody's got audio gone, or is it just because I reset the whole thing? Stream is okay. At least it says it's okay. So it should be okay. Okay, good. We're good to go. So ask away. Any questions? Let me see if we have anything here. What's the font in the thumbnail? It's Nutra Display or Nutra Text. Yeah, they have like different kernings. Is that what it's called? I actually studied graphic design, but I pretty much forgot all the terms. So if anybody knows better than me. When I export in Premiere, my colors look way less saturated. Yeah, usually it's not just the colors, it's also the gamma. Because this is the same in Resolve and a lot of programs. You have one gamma that's used on YouTube and Vimeo and everything. I think it's often 2.2. Like there's different gammas. Like 2.4 I think is Mac. Correct me on that if I'm wrong, but that means that it's a little bit different. So you have to correct. You should grade in what you want the material to be shown in. So you shouldn't grade in like 2.4 for instance and then export it to 2.2 because then you're gonna get it much brighter. So you need to play around with what the gamma is. You can probably set it up in Premiere. At least in Resolve you can just choose color managed for like a color setting in Resolve. You choose color managed and then you choose to have gamma 2.2 and that should pretty much solve that issue, I think. If it doesn't, you need to create presets that compensate for the gamma. And if it's the saturation, maybe you also have to compensate for the saturation. So try to make a preset if it doesn't work in any other way. But it's better to find a way to make it look the way it should straight away. But I think for Premiere it's probably the same, that you can choose a gamma which you preview it in. Maybe somebody can comment if that's the case, but you usually have one gamma for your screens, and then you have one gamma for whatever your final display for exhibition is. So in a cinema you would have one, in a TV you would have one, in a online environment you would have one. Usually there's kind of hard to get a standard for new things. Not that digital is new or anything, or that mobile phones or smartphones are new, but usually it takes time for everybody to kind of gather around one standard. Yeah, hope that helps. Okay, so what are your thoughts on how often one uploads to YouTube? I think we're trying to upload 3 times a week initially, because I think that's of course you can do once a week or you can do once a month or whatever. It kind of depends on what content you do. But if you do content that's like ours, I would say, that isn't as viral, or it isn't like we're not trying to make something that's easy digestible just for virality. We're trying to make stuff that we like, and we're trying to make stuff that is something that's kind of building an audience long term that is interested in the same type of things. So in that sense, even though we try to make things like mini viral within our own world, we're still seeing like a bigger impact in uploading more frequently. So by going up to 3 times a week, I would say hopefully in like 3 or 5 months time you should see a big boost in your channel. It doesn't happen right away, so don't think you can upload 3 times a week and then all of a sudden the YouTube algorithm will kind of understand it. It takes time, so you have to stick to that schedule for a while so that YouTube sees it, and then they will kind of promote you more. So first we're thinking of like 3 would be one way of scaling it up, and then we want to get to 5 next year, and I'm not sure if it's beginning of next year or whatever, if it's middle next year. But I think 5 is what we're gonna look for to kind of be in long term. Is our frequency? Our frequency is probably 5 if we can have like a sweet spot working on it full time. But of course you need to think about all these things, like, okay, what resources do you have? We actually have an editor that just came on board recently, so he's helping out, and that kind of makes it possible for us to scale it up. But we don't want to do it straight away, so we want to have a kind of a bank of videos that can go out, and we want to find a way to keep the same feel as when I edit the stuff, to kind of find a format that is true to what we've done and what we want to do. So there's a lot of those things you need to think about. You need to think about what's sustainable. You need to really think like, okay, so I can upload once a week, then stick to that if that's all you can do. If you can upload once a month, then stick to that. What I don't think people understand is that the frequency is pretty much what decides your success. So as soon as I hear people say that, oh, but my production quality is, I can't upload, more than like once a month or here and there, I'd say you can, change that. And if you want to grow, you have to change it, because YouTube depends on, frequency. I understand that a lot of people might think it's impossible, but I'd say it's all about priorities. You need to think about like, how can I stay true to what I'm doing and still do it on the level that I want, but not, make a fool out of myself and not make something that I'm not proud of. So in our case, like, we have one live stream because that makes it easy to produce one episode, and then we're looking to divide each of the tutorial episodes into 2, so that makes it to 3. And then we're making like mood videos, we're making documentaries and that sort of thing. Those might take some more effort into making, so those aren't as frequent, but we feel they're important for, the channel. So you need to find what your videos are and how it's easy for you to make fewer videos or more videos faster. But if you make fewer videos, you need to think about like, how do I stay true to what I'm envisioning but still make it more frequently. Yeah, hope that helps. So major, hi Jonny, do you see yourself as in progress as being a filmmaker storyteller? I probably ruined that question totally, but yeah, I do. I think you're always evolving. I think you always have to look on things as like, okay, so whatever I try to do is always circling around, trying to learn more, trying to develop myself and my style. And, with each project, you feel like once I get out, you feel like, oh, I'm so past this. So my last film, even though it came out not so long ago, I'm so far ahead of that in terms of how I tell stories. And usually that's because you go through the whole process of making a film for like 3 years maybe. And then during that process of filming it, which is 3 years, you develop so much, your like technical skills and storytelling skills. Then you get into the editing and you try to evolve all that, and you work with maybe other editors and other dramaturgs and all that sort of thing, and you develop by doing that. And also I work a lot with like commercial directing and that sort of thing also. So all the time there is like a parallel universe where you evolve as a filmmaker, and you also develop your projects. And that can be, I think it's for all artists, like any musician that releases new music, it's probably really old. And it can be, a bit frustrating. That's why the YouTube channel is more fun, I think, as a platform, because it's more direct and it doesn't have the layer of, like, there's a big filter or layer between you as a creator and the audience when it comes to releasing projects the traditional way. So if you work with Netflix or if you work with TV, you have to wait for them to kind of publish things. And if you have a distributor, you have that in the way. And I think it's a boring way of doing things. So that's why you always see, once a new project from filmmakers coming out, there's usually, some type of evolution in their style and everything. Okay, so okay. Somebody said audio is fine. I was selected on the wrong speaker. Sorry. Johnny, I bought myself a GH4 with a Metabone speed booster. Night and day better than my 5D Mark II. Do you have any external monitor to assist in focus pulling? Usually I don't, on the small cameras, I don't have like a separate monitor, because I usually like them to be as small as possible. And for that to work, you really need to practice a lot to find where they focus. I mean, focus peaking is really helpful. But like I have one from Alphatron that I think is pretty good. That's not the highest resolution. Let me get it. I think they've stopped making them. I also had a small HD 501, but I'm trying to sell that one. If you want it, you can buy it. But this one, I actually like this one. It's not. I think it's, is it 720p or something? It's not at all high res, but it's really easy to focus, and I really like that you have like this flip thing, and then you have a monitor screen thing, and then you just get a EVF. It has SDI and it has mini HDMI. The mini HDMI, not so good. They usually are a bit flimsy. But the SDI, I'd prefer SDI if I can have SDI, because then you know that the cable is there and it's not gonna fall off. You can even hold it in the cable if you think those things are fun. But the small HD 501, I think, yeah. That one has also a side finder. It's kind of expensive, but a nice viewfinder if you have the money for it. Other than that, I mean, I used the viewfinder on the C300, which is filming this, and I pretty much I've had separate viewfinders, but I've pretty much gone away from using separate ones because I like to have the small form factor. So in that case, look at Small HD. Their monitors is awesome. If you want a monitor only, then it's fine. If you want a like a cheaper version, I think they have the focus monitor, or is it? Yeah, I think they have the focus monitor that's low res also. That's only used for, you know, assisting in focus pulling. So let me see, what do we have? Johnny, are you going to be doing the How to Become a YouTuber series again? And if so, which YouTubers will you be talking about? Just wanted to know because that really interests me. I think we are. I'm not sure. Like we might have a really good plan for that. We're not really sure right now. But there is a big chance that we can get that much sooner than I thought. We've been thinking of doing that, you know, all the time, from time to time, find YouTubers to collaborate with and do like a story with them, like a, not your regular collab where you just have like a short thing that you meet and you do something. Instead, you try to do, you know, more of a trip or something that's, you know, more trying to exchange each other's like experiences from YouTube, outside of YouTube, much like we did with Mambo, which is, you know, he's doing a really good job with his channel, but also with his gaming channel, and it's a good way for us to learn. It's probably a good way for them to learn about filmmaking outside of YouTube too. Hopefully we can do it sooner than you think, but we're not sure when. But I think that's a good format for, you know, collaborating. It's easier to collaborate when you have a format like that where it makes sense collaborating, because otherwise, we just try to collaborate just for views, and that isn't as fun. Most important advice to your 19-year-old self: don't study. Don't go to school. That would probably be my advice. School, when it comes to creative things, is so overrated. I think it's worth much more to just go out and start making your films and start get a extra night job or day job or whatever, and make sure that you always produce things. I would probably go out and assist somebody for free, or assist somebody. That's the route that I was gonna take, and then I studied instead, because it was easier to choose studying. And I think that now I feel like that would be much smarter, to just go assist somebody, go collaborate with people, use the YouTube Spaces platform that is out there, use all the people that are online, they're much more easy to work with than people locally, I think. So try to create like a cluster of friends and go out and do stuff and support each other. That's probably what I would say. Also, advice on escaping mediocrity, the 9 to 5 succeeding in entrepreneurship. I think one thing that I get afraid of is when like creatives are afraid of being business minded. I think that's, having worked for a while with this, that's probably what sets successful people apart from unsuccessful people. There isn't, a great artist or whatever that hasn't thought about their business side of their artistry, because there's no way they can succeed, even if that's like working 9 to 5 to sustain yourself while doing your work. That's a choice to kind of focus on your stuff and not make commercials that is crap, that people tell you to do things, and not where you don't have freedom to do what you want or that you think is good. I think that's like one important part of that is creating a sustainable platform for yourself. Whatever you want to do, you need to kind of find a way to support your vision, which is whatever it is. Like for me, working in advertising wouldn't have worked if it was like 5 years ago, because then I didn't feel like I got the type of jobs that I would want to do. Now I get a lot of the jobs because I've done films, so they look at the films and they think, oh, this style is interesting, and yeah, we want to work with him because of that. If I didn't have that, I would think that I would just get boring ass commercial jobs where there's just so much pressure on you doing things that you don't like doing. So I would probably look at getting like a separate job where my mind isn't focused on anything creatively. It's just like going there, getting paid, going home, working on my stuff. I think people are too afraid of having like extra jobs to sustain themselves. But then once you have that sustainability, once you've built like a buffer with, I don't know, 6 months or a year's worth of income, so you can sustain yourself without, making decisions on the fly. Once you have that, I'd start thinking about, trying to shift my career to be not having a separate job, but to have the job that I'm doing full time and that I'm doing as a passion thing. Those should align much more. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start that way, because it's kind of wishful thinking to think that if you want to work in advertising, you're going to get the right job straight away. You probably need to set a plan that gets you there, instead of just like thinking, okay, so I'll just go out and try to sell myself to the creatives or something like that. You have to have like a platform where they see you, they acknowledge what you do, and then they offer you jobs if that's what you want to do. If you want to do something else if you want to do like just feature films or something like that, you're gonna have to have a different plan with different target groups, which is probably like commissioning editors or producers, or could be anything. Let's see. Hey, how do you get an idea for a doc? Do you think about a topic and then try to find a story in it? Also, do you think it's wrong to make a doc just for the sake of making one? I mean, it can be a little bit like when you start out, I think just making one to make one is a good like reason to make one. You don't have to have like a topic or a story in mind once you start. But once you start to get into a more professional way of working, I think it's really important to have a way of working, like a method to the chaos. For me, I start thinking about like stuff that would interest me for several years. Like what would be interesting to do something about. Like those things could be anything. It could be like just a topic. It could just be you wanting to go to some place in the world. It could be just you wanting to explore a subject, or like you being fascinating by a person. It could be anything like that. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I just want to make an environmental doc, or I just want to make an LGBTQ movie, or I think those ways of looking at it is it's kind of, it doesn't have the depth when you look at things like that. You need to think about all the layers of a film, like all the layers of, you have you need a strong character, okay? You need a strong topic. You need a topic that could be interesting, like commercially, which would be like something that media talks about or TV would be interested in say 5 years from now. For instance, if you look at climate, there's going to be like climate wars, there's going to be climate refugees for several years and years to come. So it's kind of a safe bet to look at a topic like that. If you look at something like the Syrian war, for instance, I would have thought that, the stories coming out of that would have been over a long time ago if I would look at just like the popularity aspect of it. But because it's so vital, like what happens there, TV keeps pushing that type of story, even though it's very similar to each other. Each year there is a new film about the Syrian war. Much of that I think has to do with the focus on ISIS. Just because the media is focused on ISIS, and because Trump has focused so much on ISIS, I think that you still can make those types of movies. It kind of died out in terms of the Arab Spring, for instance. If you look at Egypt, which was my first film, it kind of died out after the revolutions there. But then there was a second coming with The Square, which won an Oscar, that came out 2 years after our film. And it was quite similar in terms of take and all those things, but it followed the whole process through. So it had a bigger story and a deeper story and more nuance. Like the most films that came out at the same time as ours, it was so focused on the current affairs aspect of it. And those films usually don't have such a long life. So you think about those things, and then you pair them with locations, you pair them with the characters and what they what's their best traits or best stories, and you kind of try to mesh them in some way. But if you haven't made a doc, I would say you have to make one, at least a short doc, to start to learn the craft of it. And then I'd say I made my first film, Zero Silence. That one was made just so that I'd make one, and then I learned from that and tried to distribute it on my own, not just me, but we did it independently. And that was a learning experience that helped me with my second film. So you need to look at those things too. Let me just try to call. Let's see. I broke my phone. I can't write S. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, and Billy asks, "Hey Johnny, do you have any tips for the chronic procrastinators out there?" I think start working. Like, I have a thing on my wall which says the hardest thing is starting. I think that's pretty much what is the biggest problem. Like, once you start, it's quite easy to continue, but if you don't start, it is very hard to get anywhere. And the way I look at it is like anything that's boring, and I don't want to do things. Like, there's often things that I hate to do. Editing is one of those things where once you just start and you get into a flow, then you're good. But I think that's one issue, and then a different issue is probably setting up routines for things. I try to edit in the morning. I try to shut everything off. Like, I don't try to answer calls, social media, anything like that. At least until like 9 o'clock in the morning, so I get up early. And then after that, I want to be, only focused on editing until lunch, pretty much. That's because that energy that you have there, for me, that's the best time to edit, because you're fresh, you don't have so many things disturbing you, and anything that happens in the morning you can push to the afternoon. Whatever kind of chaos it is, it can usually be pushed to the afternoon. So it's easier to kind of structure your day according to that. And that's just because I work with a lot of clients and stuff that expect things. So then I try to push them to the afternoon, because then you have a focused period of time in the morning, and you get a lot of shit done then. And then have routines, like have routines for anything. Like, when you email, focus it around a specific time. Like, don't email for hours, email for 15 minutes, and that's it, or an hour a day. Like, decide on those things. And also read about get things done. I used a lot of those systems. Now I just use an app and program called Todoist. It's a really good way to structure like what you do. And then as a team we use Slack, which is also a good way of communicating, so you don't get emails all the time. I rarely answer my emails, so if anybody emails me, it's not just you. I don't even answer clients' emails just because they can't communicate properly. Email is not like something for me that is like this. You just email me and expect an answer to like random things, because I just get so annoyed with emails, so I just turn it off. And instead we have like Slack, which we communicate with, or anything that is more structured and gives me the maybe look at it as giving me the decision to answer or not answer, or answer on my own time. Like, the worst thing is phone calls for me. I hate to answer people's phone calls, because then it's on their time and you don't know how long will this phone call take. This can like feel like minor issues, but when you're trying to set yourself up in a mood or a way to focus around something and edit something, it's a whole process to get your mind there. So I just try to avoid those things just so I can stay focused. And also, I hate meetings. Don't do meetings. Try not to meet anybody. Like, if I do meetings, it takes so much longer than if I don't do meetings. So as much as I can avoid meetings, I avoid meetings. There's a lot of meetings in terms of working with clients, so they're forced upon me, but I think that they are a waste of time. I think there's a better way of structuring projects, and I think that there's no reason for people to meet in person to discuss a certain topic, which is a minor thing. It just it takes too much time. Stay focused, don't work with other people around you. I sit here alone in my stable outside of Stockholm for one reason, and that's to focus and not have distractions, basically. And also the one distraction of like living outside of the city, it's not easy to get people to like get me into the city, because I live an hour and a half almost outside. So for people to get me into the city, it needs to be pre-planned. It can't be like a spontaneous type of thing often. And I like that, because then I can stay focused. And this might sound really drastic and like crazy, but it's the way that works for me. Basically it's about like getting shit out of the way so that you can focus. Okay, so let me try calling here.
Bienvenido al buzón de voz claro de 2617.
I think this is an answer that doesn't work. Did I push the right one? Let me see. Nicholas. No, didn't work. Okay, so let's continue. How much for the small HT? I don't know, but somebody probably knows. Yeah, they answered in the comments. Okay, so Gianfranco. Hey Johnny, I would like to see amazing cinematics when you're back in Faroe Islands. I'm actually... Let me think. I think we have something that is coming soon with Faroe Islands. There's a mix of it. But we're also thinking of doing something like a story there. More of like a short doc type of thing. And probably in terms of like advertising or working in advertising somehow. We had an idea which might be fun, but I can't say because we haven't started working on it. But that could happen. Love Faroe Islands, want to go back. Okay, so how do you get a subject? Like a subject as a topic, or a subject, because that's what they're often called, characters. I'll just say both. Like as a topic, usually it's because I'm interested in something and I can't stop thinking about it, and I feel like this would be something that people would be interested in. And then the deeper you dig into it, the more you're interested, or you just feel bored about it and then you move on. I think that's one thing too to think about. Like, do you want to do this for like 3 to 5 years or even more? Do you want to go around festivals talking about this for that long time? And also, do you want to get work off of this project later that's the same type of work? I'm still getting like projects as a commercial director from the film that I did in 2016, and that film was made. Did we start in 2013 maybe? So once you start a project, you need to think about like there's a long, like probably 10 years is probably like a good way of looking at it. Like, do you want this topic to be something that you do for 10 years? Doesn't work always that way, but it's a good thing to think about so that you don't do stuff that you don't want to do. And then in terms of a character, this is kind of a hard thing for me, because characters are there's so many parameters in terms of getting the right characters. Like, first of all, they have to, of course, fit into the story somehow. But even more important for me, they have to be like fascinating and interesting characters. Like, they have to be like these strong, charismatic type of characters that you're fascinated by in some way. It could be, just them doing something weird, or it could just be them speaking in a way that you would listen, or whatever it would be. And if they have that, because they have to have that, I hate when, because this happens a lot, I hate when commercial projects end up not focusing so much on the casting process. Because when you do docs, everything is in the casting process. If you don't focus on the casting process to get the people right, your story is gonna suck. There's not gonna be anything there to tell the story, because you're gonna have a person that doesn't have a natural conflict. You're gonna have a person that doesn't have a natural connection to the idea. You're gonna have a person that doesn't really believe in your idea. There's tons of things that happens when you cast the wrong person. And ideas usually evolve when you find the right person, which I like to think about being like a strategic thing also. Like, picking the character has to have like some aspect of a strategic choice, in terms of like what location is it gonna play out in. For instance, is this character from the US so that you can get your film into Sundance easier than if it's somewhere else. Like, those things I always think about, even though if I don't make a film just based on that, but it's always something that's good to think about when you make a decision, for instance. And what else in terms of like the characters? Like, it's also good to think about both the drama within their life. It has to express the conflict or the idea that you're seeking. So you have to find a way to cast a person that can express what you're trying to say, because otherwise it's going to be made up, and you might as well do fiction if you don't cast the people in the right way. Okay, so hey, do you know the best settings for compressor to export out of Final Cut 10? My footage never just comes out right. It would be good to know a little bit more, like Jason Brown, a little bit more about what your settings are, because it can be a lot of things when you export. You should export. I think like YouTube and all of those have like a bitrate of a minimum 10,000 that they prefer. I think you can have like 16,000 is some presets. I think the bitrate is really important to have right, because what happens when you upload is that, first of all, the H.264 codec, it makes the footage look like blocky and that sort of thing pretty fast. So if you upload already blocky type of export from your NLE to YouTube, it will make it even more blocky. The walls and all these big fields of for instance, a wall would have a dark. Now these aren't really dark, but still, like any wall or anything that's a little bit darker like this, it will easily get like all squished, or the blocks kind of this is hard to explain. I guess a lot of people know what banding is. For instance, if you have a sky and it falls apart pretty quickly, like it starts to get a little bit blocky, what the H.264 codec does is it emphasizes that type of thing. Like before, you have had the pixel type of compression problems, but with H.264 you get, instead of that, you get blocks of information that looks really weird and digital. So you need to find a sweet spot in terms of that. And the best way I think you can do it is to try different settings, try to upload in the best quality that you can, and upload it and kind of try it out. I've found that like the media encoder does a better job than the compressor. I've used compressor a lot before, but I think that it looks more clean and better compressed in the media encoder. So try that also and compare the two. Okay. Okay, so Joris, hey man, how's it going? Good, how are you? How do you decide on your cast in case you need actors? Do you have someone beforehand, or is there some kind of casting? I talked a little bit about this, but I can touch on it in terms of like a commercial where you have a little bit of a different type of casting process there. So when I cast a documentary, I usually try to find different alternatives. I try to find like a casting person that can do some work on the ground. It's good if you find a person that can be on the ground, because they can meet the person. You don't have to go there if it's somewhere else. Like if you're in your area, it's easier. It's always better to meet the people. But when you can't do that, it's better to have somebody on the ground that can meet them, see if they're a good character, and be like judging how they speak, how they talk, are they entertaining, all those things. And then when you have that person, they will generally meet maybe, I guess they have first a selection, and then they meet maybe 3, and then they send me those, and then we try to find, okay, is anyone of them good, or do we have to continue looking somewhere else? So it can be kind of a long period of time that it takes for us to kind of nail a character. And when you look at it in a more commercial type of environment, you need to do it much quicker, because this process for a doc can be like we're casting now, and it takes months before we even have a name. And that's just because we don't like push it, and we let it take the time it has to take to get the right way into both the subject, the character, all those things. But for a commercial, you need to do it much quicker. So usually I don't know if anybody watched Instagram, but we put a project online today, which was a campaign that we did. And the way that we casted that one was that we sent out to like Facebook groups and all these forums that are like Saab enthusiasts. We sent out like an open call type of thing. And then you get names, like a lot of names of people that really want to have their Saab featured. But there's not a lot of people that has a story or an interesting story, like a personal story. So you try to filter those out and try to find the characters that embody the ID the most, which is usually how I think about it anyways. But then one casting person does interviews, like pre-interviews with all these people to decide like, are they right for the project? That usually takes a lot of time. It usually is like a long process of a month maybe of trying to find the right characters. Then once you have a couple of names, you present them to the agency and to the client, and then they will kind of give their idea of this. So first you filter it out, then you show it to them, they say what they think, and you try to find as much information about them as possible. Maybe there's interviews. So for the US one that we did now in Pittsburgh, it's for Saab original parts. So we did that commercial, and the way we casted it was that we sent out this open call to these forums. We got a lot of names. Eventually we filtered this story out, and eventually we also found an article about him in was it the Washington Post or something like that? And then we read that and we just felt like, oh, he's perfect. He is so perfect for this. And then we saw the pictures of him. He was this racing photographer called Rich, who he's been photographing like racing cars for a long time, and he's like a Saab enthusiast. So he has like 45 Saabs, like vintage Saabs. And he felt like a dream character, so we talked more about him, more to him, talked about him with the clients, did interviews with him, tried to figure out like what is the story, because we only had a character at that moment, so you need to find like angles, like what stuff in his life is interesting to bring up in a short doc. I think it's like 3 or 4 minutes. That's how we ended up picking him, and then we went there and we met him, and then things happen that is random because he's a good character. New things happen on the spot. If you don't have the right character, bad things will happen once you get there because you couldn't cast the right person. So think about those things. Okay, let me just see. This is a long one. Your thoughts on Final Cut 10 versus Premiere. I'm currently using PC, using the first PC I built to edit, but timeline scrubbing isn't smooth. I need to upgrade my PC or get a MacBook Pro options. I used to edit first I edited in Premiere. That was a long time ago. I still edit sometimes in it, but it was a long time ago that it was my main NLE. And then I edited in Final Cut 7, and then I edited in Final Cut 10. And I love Final Cut 10 in many, many ways, but I also hate it in many, many ways. If you do short projects, Final Cut 10 is really, really good and efficient if you can get used to the timeline that is weird for some people. I loved it. I think it's a really quick like learning experience. Like all of a sudden you're working faster because it does a lot of things automatically for you. So I'm a big fan of that, but most people that I talk to that are editors don't like the way Final Cut works. So think about that, try it out and see if it's like something for you. I think that in Premiere you have, if you're used to PC, you're used to setting things like manually, deciding how the computer will work. I didn't like that, so I switched to a Mac a long time ago because I wanted everything to just work smoothly. That is still an issue, I think, with a PC. I think that they're so fast, so the shift is much smaller, but it's mainly the OS that I have trouble with. But in general, like it's the same, same speeds. If you have a PC or if you have a Mac, it's not a big difference. But why Final Cut can be more efficient than a Premiere project on a PC is because it's optimized for each other. Like the components in the Mac is optimized for working with Final Cut and all those things. So if you have a computer that's built by yourself or something like that, it could be an issue that you don't have it optimized the proper way or something like that, and then it start to struggle. And so think about those things. But I think you can edit depending on what resolution you do. If you do 1080, you can probably edit on any new computer today. But if you do 4K or if you do RAW, for instance, it demands a lot on the computer, but even more so on the drives. So you have to have fast drives. You shouldn't have, for instance, a USB drive that's connected to a hub or something like that has a lot of other stuff going on. You should have it straightly connected to your computer. On the new MacBook Pro that I have, you have these Thunderbolt ports. I don't know if you see them, but you have one here, and two on the other side. All of those are insanely fast. So you can have so fast, like there's not a drive that's faster than these. It doesn't exist. So essentially having had like computers that has a lot of USB ports, but all of them are on the same bus. That is an issue. You need to find a computer that doesn't have like 4 USB ports on the same bus, because then it's gonna slow your computer down, and it's gonna slow your editing software down. But you don't have to have Thunderbolt or anything like that. But then it's also an issue of like, do you need, for instance, if you do raw material, you need a SSD to have that work properly. Even my fast like LaCie drives, they don't work properly because it's too slow for raw. So usually you have to have an SSD or like a RAID. I have a RAID that like a Promise RAID, which is like 4 drives. And that one is really quick. It's like an SSD basically in speed, but then it's super expensive. So I wouldn't get that if I don't have too much money. Other than that, just like thoughts on Final Cut 10. I think a lot of people give it so much hate because they haven't tried it, so don't listen so much to that. The reason I switched to Resolve was because I did all my grading in Resolve, and also the ingestion before I edited. So like all the metadata, I wanted it all the way through the project. So that's why I wanted one program for like everything. So it's easier to find things, and the editing in Resolve is as good as the other ones. It can be a little bit more maybe unstable at times, but now it's barely more unstable. And the biggest issue with Final Cut 10 is that I couldn't edit my film on it. I edit my feature film, The Pearl of Africa, on the Final Cut 10. It probably took an hour to open the sequences. Like, to open the project took an hour, and then, it was just total crap. But shorter projects, amazing. I've edited TV series and everything on that. If you want Premiere, you should pick Premiere if you want, for instance, After Effects and want that thing. That's when I use it, at least. If I have a project that needs After Effects, I'll probably use Premiere if it's a lot of After Effects. But if it's just a couple of clips, like a commercial I did recently where we switched the screen in devices. So we had like an iPhone that we needed to change the screen in the iPhone that a person held up. Then I do that in After Effects, but then it's easy to just export that clip, put the device thing in, and then it's done. Okay. So last question, let me see. Where was I? Okay, so now, Nicholas, too bad you didn't answer, but I'll answer this question then. Do you think that gear is an improvement? Let me see. Do you think that gear is an improvement to make films, or depends about creativity? I think that certain people that get a red make a better film because it looks better. I've worked some with, for instance, high school students that make films, and I think most of them, like, the stuff looks amazing. Like, it looks like a professional filmmaker would have done it, but they are still studying in high school. So in that sense, like, of course that makes films better, but I think any day a genius storyteller will beat that person in terms of having a story that's more emotionally connecting to people. So in that sense, like, storytelling is key, and creativity. Like, I don't think it matters if you have a Canon Rebel, whatever, the lower end cameras. I don't think that matters at all. I think any camera that you can shoot on a DSLR today, any film you can shoot on a DSLR today, is probably much better than most films that was made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Like, it's superior in many, many ways. The storytelling, if you look at like old Ingmar Bergman films or anything like that, the story narrative or the story evolution, storytelling evolution, it's changed totally. Like the whole language of film it's too old. If you look at like the Bergman films, it's just anything that you see with Bergman is pretty much like too much and too obvious. And he was a master of telling things in the subtext, but today his way of telling things are getting really, really old. And I look at him as like a master, but still of his time. If you would tell those stories today, they would be so boring and they would be so obvious. And I think there has to be an evolution in terms of that. Like, most people that come out of school today, I think, will tell a different type of storytelling than the people that did, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So in that sense, I think that you have to evolve as a filmmaker or a storyteller a lot to work online, for instance. If you tell stories in an environment like this on YouTube, you have to tell a certain type of story. You can't just put anything up there and think that it will work just because it's always been done that way. And that's where like creativity and storytelling is more important than the equipment. I think anybody that has a camera, if they can tell a strong story, that will beat the gear any day. And I think it's more important to focus on telling strong stories than focusing on gear. Like, once you have a lot of gear, you stop thinking about gear. And once you don't have a lot of gear, you always think about gear. And even for me, I think I have, more than enough gear to make a feature film. Still, it takes me time to make a feature film. I should just be able to go out and shoot it because I have the gear to do so. So it's much more about the other stuff than the cameras. And I think that's to answer the question about procrastination earlier. I think thinking about gear is, a sure way to procrastinate. It's a sure way to not make anything and just think about, I just need this camera, I just need this lens. Just go out and make stuff with one lens. Have a look at, I'm gonna send you off with this one. Let me just think what it's called. What is the film? I'm just gonna recommend a documentary that was shot on the Mira. No, the Alexa Mini. No, it's the Amira. No, the Alexa Mini, I think, which is amazing. But he shot it with 2 prime lenses, and that was it. If I can remember what it's called. God damn it. Something C. Oh, I got it. Hopefully somebody fills this in. It's a documentary about the refugees from Syria. Is in Lampedusa, I think. Lampedusa, is that where it's documentary? Fire at Sea, is that what it's called? I think so. Let me see. Fire at Sea. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so if you look at Fire at Sea, funny story is that the director, he made this last film, I think. And then Arte, which makes the best film cameras, they actually gave him an Alexa Mini, I think, to make his next film, which is this film, Fire at Sea. And then he moved and he lived on this island in Italy where a lot of the refugees came. And he made this film, he shot it himself. And with 2 lenses, 2 prime lenses. Anybody with any camera could make a film with 1 or 2 lenses. It doesn't matter if you have 10 lenses or if you have a zoom or prime, whatever. But having prime lenses, it forces you to learn how to tell cinematic stories. It's not easy to zoom. You have to move around. You have to interact with the subjects and people. And I think that's a really good way of learning storytelling with images, to being forced to do it in a certain way. But check out Fire at Sea. And it's an amazing film that looks so freaking amazing. And I think that's because he was limited in how he made the film, because he had, of course, the best small film camera, but it was also because he had 2 lenses that it looks so good, because it's consistent in its cinematic storytelling. When you choose 2 lenses to work with, you're forced to... what comes out of it is an evolution in terms of like a style that determines what style you do. So those things are, even if you have all the equipment in the world, you still have to make those decisions to limit yourself in order to create a cinematic style. Because to me, cinematic isn't, the 235, there we go, 235 bars, and it's not, things in slow motion and all that. That's just shallow shit. It's like the worst type of cinematic definition that I can imagine. Cinematic is emotionally storytelling through images and through sound. Everything, falls into place and it creates one world, one cinematic world. That to me is cinematic. Think about that until next week. See ya.